This is Sony's latest flagship camera, the A1 Mark II. Over the last couple weeks, I've been shooting with Sony's A1 Mark II. We shot amazing landscapes in Banff, tested out its features in real-life situations, challenged its capabilities in extreme weather conditions, and got a real good feel for what makes this camera a flagship. Now, this video is not sponsored by Sony. Nobody is paying me to make this video, but when Sony asked if they can send me this camera along with the new 28-70 G Master to test, I knew I had to say yes, because when will I ever get the opportunity to test out a Sony flagship again? I also want to make it clear that this is not a review, more so a first impressions video, and that's simply because I didn't have enough shooting time with it to give you guys a proper review. But we will talk about its capabilities, clear up some of the confusion about why this camera is a flagship, what I don't like about it, and show you a ton of photos that I've taken with it. Now, the A1 Mark II is considered Sony's flagship because it combines all of Sony's top tier features and specs. It has the same 50.1 full frame stack sensor that we saw in the original Sony A1, but is now using Sony's new AI processing unit, which we'll talk about in a bit. Now, you may be thinking, if this is Sony's top camera, why wouldn't it have a global shutter like we saw in the A9 III? Trust me, I thought the same thing, and it comes down to that they wanted to make the A1 II great at everything, not just speed. And with its fully stacked sensor in this A1 Mark II and its insanely fast readout speeds, that decision is why this camera excels in high resolution, 15 stops of dynamic range, and speed. The best way I can explain it is like this. A Ferrari, 10 out of 10 amazing at speed and acceleration, but 5 out of 10 on things like tech, comfortability, and suspension. A Porsche, 8 out of 10 on speed and acceleration, so not quite like the Ferrari, but also an 8 out of 10 on everything else. The A1 Mark II is like a Porsche, more refined and exceptional at everything, not just one thing. The A9 III would be the Ferrari in this situation. It's crazy fast and shoots at some insane speeds for those sport photographers, but because of its global shutter, you take a hit with image quality and dynamic range. Now, one thing that I noticed right away was that the A1 Mark II felt way more comfortable than my A7 IV, and that's thanks to its rounder, deeper grip, similar to the A9 Mark III. If you shot with Sony, you know long sessions can sometimes be uncomfortable, so this new design is a great improvement, and I hope it makes its way into all Sony cameras coming in the future. It also utilizes the new flippy tilt screen that we've seen on the A7R5 and the A9 III, which is another great design and one that meets the needs of every creative, no matter who you are. And the viewfinder, let me tell you, the viewfinder on this A1 Mark II is the best viewfinder I've used on any camera. I became obsessed with it while I was in Banff. And I've tested out a lot of cameras, and I usually never use the viewfinders because of how annoying they can be with my glasses, but this one here just looks super realistic. The only camera that has ever come close to this so far is the viewfinder on the Fujifilm GFX 100 II. Both have a 9.44 million dot resolution, and the A1 II has a refresh rate of up to 240 frames per second. It just looks really good. I also really like that this camera has dials for its autofocus and drive modes, something I wish that the A7 IV and other A7 series cameras had. Personally, the more dials, the better for me. Now, I mentioned this camera was fast, but how fast? Well, it could shoot up to 30 frames per second in continuous high-speed burst, but shooting that fast would mean nothing if it couldn't focus fast enough. And so that's where the new AI processor comes in. The A1 II has improved autofocus and the first to have automatic subject selection. So it'll automatically switch between a person, a car, a bird, much faster, but it also inherits all those amazing AI autofocusing features we've seen in recent Sony cameras, like its ability to predict a subject's movements. Anthony and I went for a skate on Lake Louise, and I thought this would make for a great speed and autofocusing test, and the results are actually insane with practically a 100% hit rate. Now, to make the A1 Mark II even faster, it also has pre-capture up to 1 second so that you never miss a shot. And because of that stack sensor, you get readout speeds as fast as 4 milliseconds, so you don't have to worry about rolling shutter. I saw a lot of people saying that the A1 Mark II is only a photo camera, and that is so far from the truth. When it comes to video, it can shoot 8K up to 30 frames per second with no crop, downsampled from its 8.6K sensor, 4K 120 with a small 10% crop, and 1080 up to 240 frames per second. It obviously has IBIS, actually Sony's best ever IBIS, which is rated at up to 8.5 stops at the center of the image and about 7 stops at the edge. And to make it even better, it has Sony's new dynamic active stabilization mode, which is essentially like a built-in gimbal, perfect for those run and gun scenarios. It's actually crazy how it works. Now I can sit here and talk about its dual card slots, battery life, but we'd be here forever, and I'd much rather talk about my experience, what I genuinely think about it. The experience of shooting with the A1 Mark II felt way different than my A7 IV. It was much more comfortable, but also way faster in how it shot, but also autofocus. Now, we spent a week in Banff and it was negative 20 degrees Celsius practically every day. Some days we were super high in elevation, and some days we were on a frozen lake with crazy wind gusts, hoping we don't get frostbite. Between the both of us, we had some cameras that slowed down in the cold. The Hasselblad Anthony was using, its LCD started lagging out and ghosting itself when it was extremely cold. Mind you, it doesn't help that that body and lens are made of solid metal, but it just didn't like the cold. The A1 Mark II, no issues at all. It didn't die out, it didn't lag, it didn't freeze up. This quite literally is a camera for working professionals. It's not a camera for vloggers, for beginner photographers. Although the A1 II is still suited for those users, there are cameras like the ZV-E1, A7 IV, A6700 that are going to be more budget friendly for those users. If you're a professional, maybe a wedding photographer, sport or wildlife photographer, high-end portrait or product photographer, or you shoot commercial stuff and you need that high resolution, dynamic range, speed, superior autofocus, superior image stabilization, the A1 Mark II is that camera you will buy so that whichever situation you put yourself in, you know your camera is not going to fail you. And that's how I felt on this trip, shooting with only the A1 Mark II and the 28-70 f2. At no point did I wish I had another camera or lens with me. In fact, I had my A7 IV, a 16-28 mm, a 24-70, a 51.2 in my bag, and those remained in my bag the entire trip. Now, the A1 Mark II sounds great, right? Well, for some people, it might not. It comes in at a price tag of $6,500 USD, which works out to $8,500 Canadian. This is not a normal cost people would pay for a camera. The average getting into more professional full-frame cameras is roughly $2,000 to $3,000. And going at more advanced, you're in that $4,000 to $5,000 range. So $6,500 is a lot of money. However, again, if you're a professional and this is a business expense, you're getting your money's worth and it'll pay itself off, this is the ultimate camera you can get in Sony's lineup. Now, the only downside is that you're not going to get internal raw recording like the Nikons. You're not going to get open gate recording to get the full height of your sensor. And for those shooting with anamorphic lenses, you're not going to have anamorphic D-squeeze options in camera. For some people, these things don't matter. But for others, spending $6,500 on a camera, they'd want to see those in there. Now, these are features no Sony hybrid camera has ever had, but it would have been nice in their flagship. Personally, if I had the money, yes, hands down, this would be the dream camera. But for me, and for what I shoot, landscapes, portraits, I don't really need the speed, the snappy autofocus. Those things would be nice. The better dynamic range and the 50 megapixels and the better IBIS for video, those things would be nice to have, but I don't constantly do professional work every day to justify a camera like this. That being said, I'd love to know what your thoughts are on the A1 Mark II. Would you consider buying it? Let me know. And if you enjoyed this video, or you found it helpful, make sure to drop a like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.